Hi, everyone, and welcome to another interview for Extraordinary Latinas. I'm your host, Ileana Rojas, and today I'm so excited and grateful to welcome Sonia del Rosal. Sonia, you're the founder and president of Third City Consulting, a licensed Illinois real estate broker, a proud Latina who is passionate about creating spaces and accessibility for the Latino community to thrive. You're a go-getter who wears multiple hats, from your consulting firm providing general management and program support to mission-driven firms and organizations. You're also a real estate broker helping Latino families through home ownership, to building leadership programs for the career enhancement of Latino professionals, amongst many, many other things. I mean, the list just goes on and on. You're such an inspiring and extraordinary Latina, and it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Good to be here. Share the stories. I'm sure I'm not the only one with the similar story. And there's so many women out there that you've already featured. So I'm glad to be a part of this group.
Oh, thank you so much. And talking about stories, I would love to, if you can share with us your story and where did it all start?
I'm gonna start it back to my teenage years. So before my 2 weeks, this is what I'm gonna start it off with today. 2 weeks before my 19th birthday, I had a husband, 2 kids, and a house. So I had to grow up pretty fast. By the time I turned 22, I was already divorced. And so I had a huge load of responsibility. And very early on, I realized you go into survival mode. You're trying to figure out how to make sure that the bills are paid, how the kids are fed, and how to move along and push forward. And so very early on, I learned no one's going to give me anything. I have to make sure I go get it. And if I need it and I want it, I have to make sure that people know what I'm going after. I grew up in a Mexican home with very traditional values. And one thing I'll never forget when I was going through my divorce is one of my dear uncles, God bless his soul, and may he be resting in peace. He said to me, "You need to come to terms with the fact, Sonia, that you will never be the ideal woman in your mother's eyes because you're not at home raising the kids." Man, that broke my heart to realize that I have to come to terms that I'm never going to be good enough, or at least I'm not going to get the stamp of approval as I pursue my career, as I balance and juggle my children, daycare, extracurriculars, and then your health. So that was a huge eye opener for me. That hurt, but it really helped me just stay focused and more determined and persevere and execute on the things that I really wanted and that were in my heart. Born and raised in the southeast side of Chicago. I love my city, regardless of what you may hear in the news. It's a wonderful city to live in. And I have 2 adult children. Those 2 little kids, they became adults. My son is now married, and my daughter, he just recently bought his house, which I helped him go purchase. And then my daughter, she just graduated with a master's in social work. So it all turned out really well, all things considered.
You touch on so many critical points for women, for Latina women, about this ideal, stereotype or these ideal image of who we are supposed to be and who we're meant to grow up to be. And along the way, in many of our stories, I think it goes far from what that ideal reality is. And you've shared many of those hurdles. What has kept you going? Like, what has been your motivator, especially through those challenging moments?
Primarily, I'm going to say my children, right? They're looking up to you, and children live by example. So whatever example I knew that I was putting forth in front of them, that they would hopefully follow if I raised them the right way. It wasn't just me. I had a support system. So for me, that was the main driver. I'll tell you this. Once my daughter went away to college, and at that time my son was living at home with his dad because he was 15, and I can only do so much for my son at 15, right? That age, for all of you mothers out there who have a teenage boy, God bless you. It'll get better, I promise. But at that juncture, my daughter was away in college her first year. My son was living with his father. And then I all of a sudden became an empty nester. And then I had like an identity crisis because no longer were these little kids relying on mom to take them here, take them there, and provide their everyday needs. They were somewhat independent of me, but I had to come to terms with identifying again my passions, because everything was survival. Everything's go, execute, goal, succeed, graduate, sell more houses, and it was all for the benefit of the family. But when they left, I really came with I struggled, and that was, my daughter's 26 now. And so she graduated from undergrad several years ago. But no one ever tells you when you're going to have children, they tell you, oh, your life's over until they turn 18. But what they don't tell you is like, now after they leave the nest, you're going to really have to identify who you are and how to spread your wings without, and being selfish, how to spread your wings and being okay. It's okay to be selfish. I still struggle with that sometimes. So for me, the driver was the children, and then making sure I set the good example through, hard work, a good work ethic, education, and then, prioritizing your family and making sure you're setting a good example. I know it sounds very generic, but that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
How you talk a lot about, this identity, or you shared with us this moment about having this identity crisis. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to, where going back to the previous comment of, we're told that we're supposed to, or we need to be a certain way, right? And then we grow, we figure out that that's not necessarily the reality. We think that we figured it out a way, and then something happens that we go through this crisis of, I was there, now I don't know where I am, and I don't know where I'm going. Has anything, like, now that you are over it and looking back, any advice in terms of, if I would have done this in a different way, if I would have leaned on, X person, like, what do you think got you over that crisis moment?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I'm thinking of, so people come and go in your life in different seasons, right? For a purpose and for a season, purpose, reason, season, something like that. Something like that. I think I'm a woman of faith, and I think through my spirituality and through my faith, I've been able to just take steps forward that I know it's not about what I know or my understanding, but rather I have to lean on something bigger, and bigger than me. So for me, that was really key, because when you go through a divorce, you kind of do some soul searching, and you just want to do right. So for me, I gravitated towards the church, towards my Christianity, and so that helped me. But I think if I have to identify anything that I do regret, or pinpoint a particular point, a juncture in my career or my life that really shaped or molded me, there's a series of them. I would say when I finally came to terms that I needed to get divorced, I finally came to terms that it's okay to be divorced. I came to terms that the only man that you can depend on is God. And nothing against men out there. I'm not hating, because I do believe in marriage. But there's just a couple of things that some hard knock lessons that I've learned, and you reap what you sow, and you really have to be the light. You have to shine your own light. You have to figure out ways how to shine your own light, because life will come at you, man. And I gotta say, it knocks you down, and no one's coming to pick you up. No one's gonna motivate you. No one's gonna do it for you. You have to want it, and you have to do it yourself. So I think the lesson there for me, or just the example is, I was a teen mom in high school, teen bride, graduated in night school with my undergrad, waited, another 10 years. And then I, got my master's, my MBA, And then, I've always been self-employed in real estate, but I always knew like no one's going to give me that raise. No one's going to give me that recognition. You have to do it yourself. You have to go out there, and if no one wants to give you a CEO position, well, then you create your own CEO position. And I'm exaggerating right now. Like I'm going a little too far, but that's my point. Like no one's going to give you that raise. You got to go out there, hustle, and make that commission. You got to make it. Sorry.
That you talk about, that go-getter resilience and perseverance that I think many of us have. We sometimes just forget it or get into our inner voices of that's not me. And it's just looking inside and finding it. Now, you've shared along the way, and I read it at the beginning, like all these hats that you wear, that you've worn at a very early stage. Like you've had to really balance out all of these different moments in your life. How do you do it? How are you able to balance it out without the balls dropping?
Yeah, look, I'm going to be honest. I don't think there is no such thing as work-life balance. I have to be honest, because there's times where I was losing hair and going crazy. Yeah, I've done a lot. I've served on boards. I've juggled work, school, career, self-employment, my business. And it's not easy. It's a lot of responsibility. And what you have to accept is there's a really great book. I'm not sure what the name of the author is, but it's called Who, Not How. And that's based on the premise that you can't do it all by yourself. If you want to succeed, if you want to advance, you got to learn how to delegate. You got to learn how to say, here, take this responsibility, take this for me, right? And so I think that for me has enabled me to execute on the goals I've had. Also, I'll say this about goals, right? It's like marriage, right? When you meet your husband or your wife, you think, you kind of know, like that's the one. He's the keeper, right? As some of you in the audience might be able to relate, right? You don't go to that person and say, hey, I really like you, but let's come back in a year and let's get married, right? No, you have to romance. You have to get to know each other, right? And the same goes for goals. You have to romance your goals. You have to constantly reevaluate. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. You got to romance it. You got to entertain it. Draw a vision board. Do what you got to do. But don't let that go. And it's all about execution. And so for work-life balance, it wasn't so much like, okay, how do I prioritize this project or that project? It was like, okay, how can I easily delegate this? What's the easiest way to get this done? Right? And where does my attention and my focus have to go to? And so that's a combination of life, experience, wisdom, and people just, accepting counsel or heeding others' counsel, in my opinion. But I would argue that I had never really found work-life balance. I think I found more peace when the kids moved out. But then they always come back. They always come back and visit. But I think, you juggle. You tend to juggle because that's what you see on LinkedIn, or you see other folks juggling all these things and having all these roles. I would not encourage folks to look up to that. Sometimes it just happens because people ask you, and we don't know how to say no to serve on a board or volunteer here or there. But it is for me, I would say, I'll never wish balancing school, night school, children, soccer schedules, full-time job, and then a side hustle. I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I don't know how I did it, because if you asked me to do that today, I would have a heart attack. I don't know. It wouldn't work.
But I think in some way it has to do, and you've mentioned it several times, about choices and about having being sure about the choices that you make and going with them. Because I have heard from many people, and I've done it even myself, that sometimes we do things because we think that we need to do things versus, really believing that it's our choice to do it. And I think in a lot of cases, that's something that we need to just own. Whatever the craziness, just own that we have those choices to handle 1,000 things or handle two. But in the end, you talk a lot about, your choices and owning them and going for it. And I think that's very to celebrate.
Yeah,
I think
and then keeping in mind that God doesn't give you more than what you can handle. I like to think that.
so true.
Right?
So
He
true.
just thinks he doesn't put anything on your shoulders that you can't handle. But then sometimes I feel like, man, God, you really think you got these big old shoulders, don't you? It's kind of heavy, this load today. But
So much. So you've been in your career such you've helped others elevate their voices. You've been their voice in many cases when they haven't found it. And I would love to hear, like, how do you elevate your voice so that it doesn't get lost? Because I think that's also a lot of something very important from a professional perspective, to be able to feel that you're growing. It's about finding that voice and really making sure that we use it for us.
yeah, I think based on my upbringing and some of the traditional values I've had, I would say that I've been really good at finding how to elevate my voice in servitude. So supporting other women. I would say as long I find all of us find joy in servitude in some form or another. For me, when I'm able to elevate and enable other women, be it in my family, my daughter, my sister, my colleagues, or my clients, for me, I've noticed at the end of that, of that purpose or that servitude, it does come back, and it is rewarding, because when you're a giver, people gravitate, and people that can acknowledge and see the if you're genuine or not. And I think when you're enjoying giving, your light shines brighter, right? You have peace, you're enjoying it. At least for me, this is just for me, right? My light shines brighter, and then people are attracted to that light. So I feel like as long as I'm giving and I'm living and I'm executing in a mindset of servitude, that does elevate my voice. Um, and I'm comfortable with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm subservient, or I just like to work behind the scenes. I do, but it you do get acknowledgement towards the end of it. I've experienced that, whether it be on a board, or even with real estate brokerage, or with my clients. So for me, it's servitude, and then making sure when there's an opportunity that I see that I know complements my skill sets or complements my goals, I do have to insert myself. No one's going to insert myself, right? You have to learn to insert yourself in spaces that you want to thrive. And sometimes it's uncomfortable to insert yourself in those spaces. I'm intentionally inserting myself right now, and you're probably this is on my LinkedIn profile, right? The Chicagoland Investors Organization. We're transitioning that name to something else to reflect real estate, but that space traditionally in real estate investments, at least within the Midwest or in Chicago, is traditionally white men. And so there were a group of white Jewish men that approached us to help enable, the real estate mission, this advocacy for real estate legislation. So it was. I don't roll with white Jewish guys. I didn't grow up on the north side of Chicago, right? I grew up with a bunch of tios, a bunch of Latinos, like alpha males. So it was uncomfortable for me to insert myself in that space. But I'm doing it. And I'm enjoying it, right? Because everybody needs a little Latinas, in their life, right? You got to have some Latina flavor. So we're it. We are it. We are being welcomed. Just insert yourself in those spaces, knock on the door, and people will open and listen.
I think it's about two things. When I hear it talking, it's about one, that authenticity and really embracing who you are. and people will react positive to that because they know that you're doing it, from the bottom of your heart and living on what you believe in. And the other is about being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Like you say, like inserting yourself in places or doing things that you're like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or how to do this. But, you still do and move ahead and learning along the way. And those are two great pieces of advice. How do you, in all of this, how do you keep work on self-care now that it's becoming such an important thing?
Lots of meditation and prayer for me. Right now, I can't go jogging or bike riding or exercising because I have a bum knee. I think I tore a meniscus. I'm not sure what it is, but I can't do much exercise right now. So I'm going a little crazy. But it's a combination of meditation, prayer, and I will say creativity. I'm trying every single day, particularly when the pandemic hit. I said to myself, you need to create. And so if that means a new dish, a new, color palette on your makeup, a new outfit, try to create something new every day. I started gardening and planting, started taking care of plants. So for me, that there's some sense of joy in creating things and bringing things together. So that gives me peace. It gives me joy. And then my 2-year-old niece, because my children are going, and I am not a grandmother, not yet at least. So I think children bring joy to a home. So yeah, that's
awesome. Anybody that has inspired you or motivated you or mentored you along the way, I think that's something that we're not used to, many of us, and can be an important part of leaning into for a career growth.
Yeah, professionally, I'm going to say I've had some great mentors. My sponsoring real estate broker of 20 years, when I first started in real estate, he actually approached me and he mentored me and taught me everything he knew, from investing, just obviously to sales, but really just the aspect of real estate, building wealth through real estate, building generational wealth through real estate. So I learned a lot from him. And if there's one big takeaway that I can share is he always would say to me, don't ever get greedy on commission. Don't even calculate your commission, because if you're good to your clients, they will always come back. Even when you upset them, they'll always come back. And I got to tell you, that's worked for me all throughout these last 20 years. So he was a great mentor. I used to work at a bank before I started doing real estate. So my mentor there, another male mentor. So I had 2 male Latino mentors early on in my career. He enabled me to attend night school and kind of bring the work to the school homework to work without me just turning a blind cheek. So shout out to him. Andy, I love you if you're listening. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then the women in my life, I would say, came in later in my career, and that was a combination of the women I met at Mujeres de ACE. ACE, Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, currently is my client through Third City Consulting, and I came to learn about ACE's good work back in 2010, and they offered this Mujeres de ACE leadership development program, and in that program, I met great women, and it was the first time in my life that I was actually at a table with other Latina women that were smarter or more opinionated or more successful than I was. Because in my little bubble, I was it, right? Not a lot of people in my family or women in my family were attending school or graduated from college, or had careers. But that group of women for me really was motivating and inspiring for me, because we shared similar journeys, similar values, similar obstacles. And then just making sure that I surrounded myself with them. That was really powerful for me. And I've had two prior executive coaches that really have enabled me to make decisions throughout my career in the last 5 years or so. And one of them was a Latina woman, and then another gentleman, he was a Latino a Latino executive as well. So a combination, obviously, throughout the seasons of your career. Unfortunately, no one in my family, other than my mother, looking up to my mother and, you know, her commitment to family and to care, right? The household, and the sacrifice that she's always demonstrated in raising her children and grandchildren. So I would say a combination of that. To close that out, I'm going to say you are, they say, I don't know what author said this, but you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So take an accounting of who you are surrounding yourself with, be it your friends or your family, and you're the average of those folks. So you got to aim high. If you want to go places, you got to aim high, right? I made a observation the other day with my 2-year-old toddler niece, and I said to my sister, I was like, do you know that all the women that this little girl surrounds herself with all have advanced degrees? I said she has. So it's myself, my daughter, my sister, and then one of our cousins. So the 4 women that my niece surrounds herself with all are educated and have careers and, you know, have master's degrees, and nothing against any woman that doesn't, right? But this is just my niece's good fortune, right? This is her destiny. And I said, man, she's going to be awesome. She's going to either be an engineer. She's going to be great.
You can unmute. We're good.
Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. This never happens. Crazy.
Oh my God. But you know what? I love the quote that you mentioned. I hadn't heard the quote, but I've heard sort of the thought of you know, knowing and acknowledging who we surround ourselves with. And that'll give you great perspective into how much you're challenging yourself and how much you can push yourself to do something that maybe you hadn't thought of. And I think a lot of us, and again, I include myself, because I can think of some moments in the past where we might fall into this comfort zone, right? Into, you know, just everybody else is either like us or you know, in a different stage in their careers from where we want to go, and that in a way might not be the best way to push us into moving forward. So I love that advice. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. It's really been a pleasure, you know, getting to know you a little bit more. I've been showing your LinkedIn, your Facebook, where people can reach you. Any other place where they can contact you and get to know more about you.
Sure. Thank you, Eliana. I really appreciate this opportunity just to share my story. Sorry about the background noise. But yeah, I would encourage anyone, you know, if you want to reach out and connect, I'm happy to connect and, you know, take it from there.
Awesome. Well, it has been a pleasure to be with you today and hearing about your extraordinary story as a woman, as a Latina. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to talking with you again.
Here. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.